It's almost like I started building a bridge to the other side. Now I'm gonna go walk back into my body and start again. It's daunting.
We were told it was gonna be a long road. Doesn't mean that I don't think that maybe at some point Sean might change his mind.
Push, here comes your baby.
There you go. Jared's test came back positive for the Lyme antibody. He may end up getting very sick someday because of it.
My life was so uncomfortable to be in that I don't know that I would have wanted to be here had I not had stronger family connections, you know.
She couldn't hold her head up. She couldn't sit up. She couldn't talk anymore. They insisted that she's making it up.
We allege that Dr. Jones prescribed an antibiotic to a patient he did not know and had never examined.
If they succeed in taking his license away, I just don't feel that he's gonna feel like he needs to be here anymore.
They decided to suspend my license. Financially, I've lost everything.
There's a message that's going to be sent to the other doctors that it's not safe to take a Lyme patient on.
So there's something funny. I don't know what that something funny is.
At what point will people say the emperor has no clothes? How many more people are going to suffer before the truth comes out?
A common disease appears to be much more common than first thought. About 30,000 cases of Lyme disease are reported each year. The Centers for Disease Control now say the real number of cases is more like 300,000.
The CDC put out a press release saying Lyme is 10 times more common than the Lyme statistics say it is. But we kind of already knew that, and what we would like to have seen in that press release is, here's what we're doing about it. We may be patients, but we are not patient anymore. We've had enough.
You're gonna have to work outside soon. It stopped raining, so you can work inside.
We were living in Connecticut, and we had to find a place that was safe. It was tick safe. We were angry, we were fearful, and here we are in Hawaii in paradise. And truly it is paradise for us regarding Lyme disease. Last time we met, we were sitting and watching a healthy little boy. I didn't like to use the word Lyme disease. However, when he was about 3, it was pretty evident that he was getting sick. One day, we got into the city, we walked 10, maybe 15 minutes, and my son turned to me, Jared turned to me and said, "I'm too tired, Mommy, I'm too tired, I can't walk." So I had to use the word that my son had the Lyme disease.
In utero fetal transmission of Lyme disease to a fetus is something that has been of concern to patients. We've looked carefully at that. There have been numerous studies. There has not been one documented case of congenital Lyme disease.
My story proves that it's not anecdotal, that it is happening probably every day. Children are being infected in utero, and that if something isn't done, we're going to end up with very, very sick children.
Good afternoon, everybody. Continuing hearings on the case of Dr. Charles Jones.
The 2 children who were subject of the initial allegations are doing well. They are free of tick-borne diseases and are thriving. And by estimate, have healed over 18,000 children. The main effect of the licensing board actions has been financial. That's been a horrendous expense and continues to be so. I think they must be touching near $1 million right now.
I'm going my 7th year of bankruptcy. I'm still in litigation with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and unfortunately, they have really just no motivation to bring this to a close.
Dr. Jim Seck's license is suspended for 1 year, and the conditions to be determined.
After I was forced to leave North Carolina and move to Washington, D.C., I never really lost my license, that I wasn't allowed to practice medicine the way it ought to be practiced. And then I ended up owing millions of dollars. And that just wiped me out. I lost everything.
Sean and I got married in 2005, and then I guess my treatment was complicated. It made me scared for the future of my relationship, that my spouse was gonna go because my spouse couldn't take it anymore, or this was just like too much. The last 2 years of our relationship weren't doing very well at all. And so Sean and I ended up getting a divorce. He probably wanted something a little less stressful than Lyme, as did I. You know, we didn't really know what we were getting into. You're like, man, we just got married, you know? Bam, I'm in the hospital, and bam, this is happening, bam, that's happening. You just feel like you're in the water and it's up to your head.
The problem with Lyme disease is nobody really knows what it is. They've heard something about flu-like symptoms, and if a person is in bed all day because they can't stand bright light, they can't even go outside, they think that this is malingering. So there isn't a broad kind of community support for the ill family. There wasn't for us. This had tremendous effect on my wife and on my children, and this family is no more. There was a divorce, and the family has gone its separate ways.
After Under Our Skin, I was unable to continue working as a medical doctor. I was unable to remember details of my daily work. I wouldn't be able to remember medical terminology.
It was very precarious. It was very difficult. He wasn't able to be functioning the way he used to function.
We were aware that it was going to be necessary to have a complete panel of Lyme tests because of my exposure over 30 years. These are the Harvard brain DNA extracts in this tube. The tests did not come back with evidence that I had Lyme, but the doctor who was taking care of me came to a preliminary conclusion that it might be frontotemporal dementia, and that usual pattern of survival is 3 to 5 years.
I was thinking about not continuing practice. You know, licensing board wins, the kids lose. And while I was making this decision, a child came into the office and he had never talked. One of the times he's running around, he came up before me and I put my hands on his cheeks and said, I hope I have the key that it can unlock your brain. And he's off running, and I thought I'd spoken to the air. He came back 4 months after being diagnosed and treated, walked in the door, didn't run in the door, and came right in front of me and put my hands on his cheeks and looked me directly in the eyes and said, thank you for giving me the key that unlocked my brain. And I said, that's it. I'm going to stay.
When I got out of the wheelchair at Dr. Jones's office, it was almost like you have your life taken away from you, and then it's like getting your life back again, but it's not the same. You appreciate everything more, and just being able to walk down the stairs anytime you want, go anywhere you want. I'm still on medications, but I'm doing a lot better. I'm in college, studying biology, and I even have a boyfriend, which I never really thought was possible. Right now I'm working as an EMT, which is an emergency medical technician. I drive the ambulance and take care of patients in the back of the truck. At least 8 out of 10 times, person is like, wait, you can't lift me. I'll have these moments where I'm driving the ambulance on a call or something, and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm driving an ambulance. How did this happen?
After so many years of being sick, I was resolved and resigned to leaving my body. The idea of coming back into my body seemed really daunting. I thought I would either die or live with this pain forever. And I'm just so amazed that I can think clearly again and I have pain-free days. Having the support that I needed made it all possible.
That's just you too.
So, you know, layer by layer, piece by piece, I came back in. I'm back. I'm in my body. I'm not afraid. That's not true. I am afraid. But I know I can deal with it. After 3 years of treatments in Seattle, I moved back to the Bay Area, back home. I married Tim, and I've been maintaining my health. At the clinic, I was recognized often in the waiting room, and I got to be an inspiration to people, a hero. This guy. It was a bittersweet time because coming home, everything's the same here, but I was different. I miss that community, and I'm trying to recreate that now.
The comparison between the Mandy that you saw in the documentary and the Mandy that's here now, it's just kind of night and day difference. I haven't had to have any more antibiotics or drugs or anything. Drug-free. That experience just made me want to go into healthcare and, you know, try to change things a little bit. I got a job as an intermediate care nurse, so I deal with some heavily compromised patients. I work 48 to 60 hours a week. I had one patient, and they were talking to me. Yeah, and I was watching a show on PBS, and it was about Lyme disease, and they have no clue that I was in that documentary. And so they're talking, and then they're kind of like, how do you know so much about Lyme disease? And I'm like, saw the same documentary. Since nursing school, I sat for my boards. I went to Paris. I went to Italy. I lived in Costa Rica for a month, helping children. So now my next goal is I have to get really fit. And that's gonna hurt. Really not looking forward to that, but that's the next goal.
She's used to sharing her life with the fans of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, but model Yolanda Foster has been opening up and sharing even more lately about her difficult battle with chronic Lyme disease.
I was struggling for about 2 years before I finally was diagnosed.
No joy luck for best-selling author Amy Tan. Lyme disease nearly killed her career.
Somebody asked me the name of the book I was working on, and I couldn't remember.
Another side of Darryl you might not know about is he's struggling, despite all that money, with something called Lyme disease.
You find out you have it if suddenly you're down on the floor. This is serious stuff.
Anjali Van Lannon, you probably don't recognize her without slashing some serious powder there.
I did battle Lyme disease for over a decade.
I mean, this is unbelievable that Lyme disease to go an associate.
I was asked to speak at a Lyme rally in Norway, and I was invited to stay with adventurer Lars Monsen, who apparently is one of the most famous people in Norway today.
Jordan Fisher-Smith, welcome to us. You're kind of the equivalent to Lars Monsen.
Well, we
in the
both
States,
are.
right?
We both have been working in the outdoors, in nature, all of our lives.
And you have another thing in common, because you also have been affected by the Lyme disease.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Now I see the same thing happening in Norway, so I'm here to help.
When I got ill, I understood this is just like a long expedition. You have to have the same mindset, make the same choices.
Yeah.
You know, look ahead, and just choose what thoughts to think.
I think the one thing that being ill, and not just with tick bite, having a dream and keeping it through the illness that's an important thing. Don't give up your dream. I always expected to get better, meaning that I couldn't imagine living the way I was living. The experience of living in a Lyme body is the worst misery I've ever suffered. It turns your body into a torture chamber. I think that I had one attribute that might have saved me, that I was trained as a ranger for 21 years to recognize a deadly situation and then being absolutely relentless in fighting my way out of it. Everybody's asking me, why are you better? What worked for you? What drug exactly did you take? The answer I almost always give people is, I took all of them. I was able to stop taking long-term antibiotics almost 7 years ago now. The greatest problem that I see Lyme people having is that they're set in a public health setting that is doing its best to deny them treatment. You're going to have to fight for yourself while feeling awful and not feeling like doing anything. And this was certainly my greatest challenge, was continuing to fight for myself.
When I shared my story in Under Our Skin, I sort of became this poster child for Lyme disease, and that frightened me because in some ways it kept me in my story, and people felt like they wanted to share all their symptoms with me, and sometimes it would overburden me when I was still really sick. So I was resistant to talking about Lyme disease for about 5 years because I didn't want to talk about this bug and this hideous illness. I wanted to talk about what it means to heal and what that journey looks like. I think that's where I get healed, when I can help people that have gone through the same thing that I have. So with Lyme Less Live More, we really wanted to bring people into our world and really meet some of the people that have been so inspirational in our journey. We're so lucky and happy to have Dietrich here today to answer a lot of your questions.
If you have Lyme disease, by my definition, it means also you belong to a tribe here on the planet that is more conscious and more sensitive and also more likely to do something once you recover that will be of benefit for all of us.
I think we need to look at people with Lyme disease or chronic illness as indicators. They're indicating the problems in our environment, in our world, and this disconnection we have.
The illnesses that we see now, almost all chronic illnesses, including the neurological illness, are almost entirely caused by microbes and their activity in us. And the microbes are no longer symbiotic with us because we are not symbiotic with the environment.
My hope is to help people to step out of the fear and the hysteria around Lyme disease and to show what it means to treat and heal holistically. I don't think, for me, antibiotics were the answer. When they were needed, they were very appropriate and they were the answer. But to get me out of this chronic illness, it was going to take way more than just a pill to kill off the bug. Now I understand that healing happens on all levels. So taking on your own pain, emotionally and spiritually, that was the greatest breakthrough for me.
There you go.
You know, we talked a long time about whether or not we should try for the 5th time. I'd had 4 miscarriages, and we knew that the risk of him being sick and the risk of him being born and dying right there was out there. But I knew that I always would have regretted not trying, and I knew that if he were born and he were sick, we could care for him.
Full speed, full speed, full speed.
Jared was born with Lyme disease, and he started coming here, and he's made it. You know, he's done very well. He's made it. He's a happy little kid.
If I did not have Dr. Jones in my life, I probably would not have had a little boy. The fact that he was born well enough for me to hold him and care for him, and he grew, was amazing. It's a miracle. I really think it's a miracle. I call him my miracle baby all the time.
So I received a diagnosis of a terminal condition, and after I received that, I gave up my medical license, stopped my medical practice, stopped my research. I got rid of about $100,000 worth of laboratory equipment. I donated it to colleagues who were doing Lyme research. My medical career had ended.
It was a rough time. It was definitely a rough time. I knew that we're losing a very good scientist here, because I think passion gonna bring you really somewhere which nothing else can help you with in science.
When they diagnosed Alan with the frontotemporal dementia, a lot of it was based on scans and psychological testing. A couple years later, they redid his testing, and they tell him he passed with flying colors. And then they said, well, you don't have the dementia. And then we were basically dismissed.
I was lucky that there, over time, was a healing. And what caused the healing, I don't know.
He's back, and then he's ready to fight for this disease again.
And under our skin, Alan McDonald, Dr. McDonald, first exhibited the role of biofilm.
One night as I was looking at the culture of Borrelia, I saw a large colony of organisms protected by a gel-like substance. And as I was reviewing the pictures, it became clear that this was very reminiscent of what they call a biofilm.
A biofilm is a hallmark of a chronic infection. It is a gelatinous substance that encases the germs and protects them from immune system attack and protects them from even antibiotics, rendering the infection more chronic and more difficult to treat.
Chronic infection is denied by the Infectious Disease Society of America at all costs. Everything that is built into biofilms is essentially supportive of chronic Lyme infection.
Borrelia biofilm, we proven that it exists in the test tube. The next question is, does it exist in the body? Recently, we found evidence that we found Borrelia biofilm in human skin tissues.
So that's strong evidence that the role of Borrelia in many cases is due to chronic Borrelia infection of the biofilm type.
Over the last number of years, more and more evidence has come out, including biofilm work by Alan MacDonald, that supports the notion that chronic Lyme exists. In other words, an infection of Borrelia Lyme that can persist for long periods of time and even be treatment resistant.
There was a study that was on monkeys. Very important, groundbreaking work. When you treated a rhesus monkey for the same period of time that you would treat a human, they continued to have persistent spirochetes in their tissues. And then the last thing they found, which is also critical, is they found that monkeys that were not treated, that had been given Lyme disease, that those monkeys over time tested negative on the test too. So there's something that happens in the immune system so that you can't detect.
Lyme disease was first identified in the 1970s, but it now turns out that it's much more common than previously estimated, about 10 times more.
The CDC now estimates there may be as many as 300,000 new Lyme infections a year.
It's a really important jump. It's 6 times the number of HIV cases, 50% higher than the number of breast cancer cases. It's a huge problem.
There's conjecture in the Lyme disease community that the reason the CDC all of a sudden re-announced that Lyme disease cases are really 300,000 a year is to pre-market for an upcoming Lyme disease vaccine.
The vaccine is entirely dependent on antibodies to one protein, which is OSPA. They've chemically combined a European OSPA with a United States OSPA, and they believe that this combination, which is unique, will provide protection against anything that a tick can put into your bloodstream. But the co-infections and many strains are not within the job description of vaccine protection. So the vaccine's not like Kevlar that stops all bullets.
The worst thing that could happen to the patient community would be for people to come in, use the patient community to market a vaccine that harms patients. The last vaccine that they had out actually harmed patients. It harmed people who weren't sick.
If Lyme disease responds to 30 days of treatment across the board, what's the need for the new Lyme vaccine?
One of the problems is that there hasn't been a strong interest in going after treatment options because most of the treatments are cheap generic antibiotics. But with vaccines, it's a patentable product and it's got a large market.
It puts into question the scientific integrity of people doing the studies.
Some of the consultants in connection with this new vaccine are IDSA guideline members.
Members of the CDC, IDSA, and others have patents for diagnostic testing and for vaccines. They've arrogantly used their pulpit to deny their patents.
When I was doing research, it just appeared that the CDC was a key player in fanning the flames of the Lyme disease war. They wouldn't talk to us directly at conferences, or they wouldn't answer our questions over the phone. My impression is that CDC and IDSA was trying to avoid having information released in a nationwide documentary film. July of 2007, we filed a Freedom of Information Act. It asked for emails from 3 employees and financial disclosures. By law, the CDC is supposed to release those documents in about a month, but they weren't released for 5 years, 4 months, and 24 days. When I finally received the documents, we got 3,000 pages back. Over half were censored, and they never did give us their financial disclosures. The big thing is the CDC has been collaborating with the Lyme guidelines authors in a way that's outside of government rules and regulations. Among Lyme disease patients, there's a feeling that the money has all been going to the same people who have a bias against the existence of chronic Lyme disease, and a real disrespect for the patients. NIH officials call Lyme patients Lyme loonies. They call their treating physicians quacks. There's one NIH official who says this is a war with patients and we need to start shooting back.
Thousands of Americans come down with Lyme disease every year.
The medical system seems unable to deal with a disease.
If it's untreated, it can trigger permanent neurological and physical degeneration.
By the time it strikes your central nervous system, it could be too late. Health insurance companies won't pay for chronic Lyme disease treatments.
Tens of thousands of out-of-pocket dollars.
La maladie de Lyme, elle touchera entre 8 et 10 000 personnes en France chaque année.
Die Zahl gefährlicher Borreliose-Erkrankungen ist in Norddeutschland in den vergangenen 3 Jahren deutlich gestiegen.
It's known as Lyme disease. Thousands suffer from it, and the symptoms are devastating, often fatal.
In my practice, I've seen children from all over the world, from every state in America, every province in Canada, every state in Mexico, South America, Central America, China, Japan, India, Australia, New Zealand, and every single country in Europe.
We have official data of around 60,000 cases, but the unofficial number is several hundred thousand each year.
1,500 cases every year reported, and in the last 10 it has doubled.
Officially, there are more or less 30 to 40,000 cases, new cases each year. But it is not the real situation.
50,000 new cases. Some of the doctors are threatened to lose the licenses.
As of last year, 100% of Canadian doctors now who have become publicly known as treating Lyme disease have now been shut down.
In the US, people are debating about the severity, whether there's chronicity, whether treatment works. In Australia, the debate is it doesn't exist.
Good evening and welcome to the program. First tonight, the silent and deadly killer that's striking down healthy Australians every day. This hideous infectious disease is spread by ticks and other insects such as fleas and mites, and unless diagnosed and treated immediately, can have tragic consequences.
A man has died from a disease he caught from a tick, but yet again, authorities here refuse to acknowledge the disease exists in Australia.
Officially, Australia is not an endemic area due to a study that was done 20 years ago.
Some microbiologists gathered 12,000 ticks, crushed them up, found some Borrelia-like organisms but decided they weren't Lyme and discarded them, and then reported there is no Lyme disease in Australia.
However, there is a Lyme-like disease in Australia. So it's accepted there's a Lyme-like disease in Australia, but they don't know the causative agent.
Actually, one of the problems in Lyme disease is its very name, Lyme disease. Lyme is an infection by the germ called Borrelia. And the reason why that's important is because there are hundreds, literally 200 to 300 different kinds of Borrelia, and Lyme disease is from just one of them.
Lyme disease needs to be renamed, period. I don't care what you call it, but there's too much of a stigma, there's too much prejudice around Lyme disease. The moment those two words come out of a patient's mouth, immediately, if you just look around, you'll see an eye roll. And that's how you know that person is no longer open or really should be treating that.
We now need to divorce ourselves from the confines of Lyme as a word and as an easy to cure, hard to get infection, and open it up to Borrelia complex as an easy to get, hard to treat infection due to multiple species and multiple co-infection. There are no rules for borreliosis complex on the CDC website, and IDSA has no rules for borreliosis complex. So let them have their Lyme, let the rest of us have borreliosis, and let's get on with life.
Well, the medical community seems to be split by the great Lyme disease debate. Is it sexually transmitted? Is Lyme disease the next epidemic after AIDS?
The study that was just published in abstract form in the Journal of Investigative Medicine described genital secretions in patients with Lyme disease. What we found was that you can find live bacteria that cause Lyme disease and also the same strain of the spirochete in married couples. I think it's really a game changer that will completely change the way people look at this disease.
There's things that I'm feeling that probably happen to everybody. Like one of my eyes is blurred out and I've always had 20/10 vision. I won't tell you that it's not in the back of my mind that it is possible.
Sean had antibodies for Lyme, but they said that he was not symptomatic to treat. He's had no issues with it, and he's had no need for treatment.
If you think about how many people are probably infected, it's overwhelming how many people could actually be very, very sick. It's scary.
WCBS in New York, they are at the scene. We do know at least one person transported with a gunshot wound, and the gunman is dead there at the scene. Len Vestoff was talking a short time ago, and he was talking about
Newtown, Connecticut. Today is a very different word than it used to be. It's a different place. The world knows about it. For us, Newtown was a place we raised our children. It was a place we spent 8 years. It was a place we loved, but we feared because of the ticks. So when Newtown happened, I just sat on this chair and I cried. And I just cried, and I just desperately tried to get in touch with people I knew. Because my son, Jared, could have been in that first grade class. When it became clear that there was a teenage boy who had taken his own life, killed his mother, and so violently hurt other children, there's no doubt it went through my mind that he was sick with Lyme disease. There was some information that perhaps the mother had been diagnosed with MS. And immediately then I put the two pieces together. Very well could have had congenital and pediatric Lyme disease.
Doctor, you claim that it is a possibility here that Lyme disease leading to Lyme rage may have been the reason why the shooter acted in the manner that he did.
No question about it. The literature is filled with cases of Lyme disease that affects the brain. You must consider Lyme disease in this perpetrator.
A common mistake that many doctors make is they say, well, that's psychiatric, so therefore it's not related to Lyme. With some of the children, teenagers, adults, I can see Lyme rage, and it's hard to believe unless you've seen it.
A deadly church shooting in Illinois leaves some local folks in shock.
Prosecutors have now charged 27-year-old Terry Sedlak with murder.
While police are not commenting on a possible motive, Sedlak's mother blames her son's erratic behavior on Lyme disease.
It's important to make sure that there's not Lyme disease that's driving the whole psychiatric problem.
Lyme disease is most commonly treated with oral antibiotics for generally 14 days. Most people respond very quickly, and by the time they're concluding their antibiotic therapy, they're almost 100% improved.
I feel completely well. I have had no symptoms since day 3 of that antibiotic.
Chronic Lyme exists! 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 Chronic Lyme exists!
Today, I'm just asking and praying that somebody in that building over there can develop a trace of skepticism for what they think they know for sure. Because we have this one group of diseases for which denial is the cure. We get 28 days of oral antibiotics and then you're done. And whatever you have, it must not be Lyme.
The Infectious Disease Society of America guidelines are effectively being used to restrict diagnosis, to restrict treatment, to have insurance companies deny treatment, to deny proper care to Lyme disease patients across the board.
When we develop guidelines, we create a panel that reviews all of the evidence that's available to decide what is in the best interest of patient care. I want to emphasize one point. Guidelines are exactly what they say they are. They're guidelines. They're not rules. They're not laws. They're designed to guide physicians in the care of patients.
Seven years after the guidelines were published in 2006, nothing's changed. The Attorney General had brought a case against the Infectious Diseases Society of America Lyme guidelines authors and said you must reevaluate those guidelines with an unbiased panel and update them.
Our investigation concerns whether the antitrust laws have been violated, purposefully or not, by these guidelines.
The Attorney General for Connecticut was well-intentioned but misguided. No one on the panel that wrote the guidelines for Lyme disease stood to benefit from the recommendations that were made. So when they suggested an independent review, why not? We have total confidence in our guidelines.
Well, there was a hearing held, and they put together a panel to review the guidelines. Nobody who was on the previous guidelines could be on that panel. But they screened for conflicts of interest, but they didn't screen for impartiality. Everybody who sat on that panel was a member of the IDSA. So it's sort of like having, General Motors decide whether Ford's cars aren't good. It was not impartial.
During a period of several weeks, we solicited comments from the general public, physicians, scientists. We also looked at any new evidence that has come to light since 2006.
They listened to all of the evidence, and then they came to a conclusion. They weren't going to revise the guidelines.
Treat our chronic Lyme today. IDSA, treat our chronic Lyme today. IDSA, treat our chronic Lyme today.
I came to listen to Gary Wormser, who's the lead writer of the guidelines, to try and hear about if they're revising the Lyme disease treatment guidelines. At the very end of the session, they said they're just in the beginning stages of rewriting the guidelines. That's, to me, that's a huge tragedy because the guidelines are already 7 years old.
Two different areas we are trying to help. So one thing, step one is make sure that you're heard. You were heard in 2009 at the panel. You're heard now, and that's why we're here. And step two is find things where we have shared interests. I mean, I think we're all interested in better epidemiology. We're all interested in better tests.
It's interesting because one of the things they said to me was, we need to find the area of things that we agree about, and we all agree the diagnostic tests aren't good. And I was surprised because they have guidelines that say you have to have a positive diagnostic test in order to be diagnosed and treated. But there's, there may be a growing recognition on their part that the diagnostic tests aren't good.
The problem with Lyme disease is its deniability. When you have a situation like we have right now, which is that there really isn't an effective blood test that will tell us all the time whether a person is or is not infected with Borrelia, you have a situation of plausible deniability for health maintenance organizations, insurance companies, skeptical doctors. The magic bullet right now is clearly a good test.
Dr. Miracano, good luck in whatever you do. You're a wonderful doctor.
After I closed my practice, I went to work for a biotech company, and one of the contracts I got was from a lab in Pennsylvania, and they wanted our advice on developing a high-value blood test. Under my direction, they assembled a team. We included Dr. McDonald, Eva Sapi, and some others. The game changed now. This is a culture test. It can show whether you still are infected post-treatment. It can show whether you have Lyme in the beginning, even if the standard serology tests, which we know are not very good, even if those tests don't show Lyme.
There is additional work being done in Oslo, Norway. All of this is direct microscopic examination of human blood.
The revolutionary with my method is to dilute the blood with a thin solution of water and salt. That makes the single organisms available. In a few minutes, you can see the immediate situation in your body, and you can see it by your eye if you are an experienced microscopist. Using this microscopical technique, we are in principle able to detect chronic borreliosis. Yes. You can identify it with simple microscope like this, which is 110 years old.
Now, if you look on the CDC website, the gold standard that the CDC holds up as the gold standard is growing the bug from body tissue. Advanced Labs has grown the bug from blood, which is a body tissue. What did the CDC do with this? The CDC wrote a paper saying that Advanced Labs was not to be trusted, that all of the cultures, 70, were contaminated.
So it looked almost like a rushed through attempt to try and discredit something without really thinking it through.
In my 30 years of practice, I have never seen the CDC go after one laboratory and attempt to put it out of business. It doesn't make sense scientifically, but it makes sense politically. The CDC does not want chronic Lyme disease to have a foothold as a legitimate medical entity in the United States or elsewhere in the world.
Some medical professors complained to the university, and we got decision that we should stop immediately. That has never happened in Norway before in any topic.
There was a rebuttal to the study of sexual transmission in Outside magazine. Paul Lantos, who's from the IDSA, raised some points about sexual transmission that he claims make it unlikely. I think that the people who hold that point of view will do pretty much everything they can to maintain it. The CDC uses a very restrictive definition of Lyme disease. It certainly restricts the criteria for the disease, so it makes it easier to get a vaccine approved. For a vaccine to work, you have to vaccinate people who were not infected. So if we now find that there are a lot of people who've been infected through sexual transmission, then that's going to decrease the market for the vaccine significantly.
What has happened in Lyme disease, I think, is really uncommon in a way. Research has been very insular. It's a really tiny group of people. The IDSA, there's like 5 people. They sit on most of the editorial boards, and they are involved in most of the grant-making decisions. Open science only exists when you have competing viewpoints being in the same arena. It doesn't work when you exclude other people who think differently from you.
The story of Lyme disease has been that the public health response has blown in the direction of the big money. Healthcare is seen as an industry, not as a compassionate response for ill people. We believe ourselves to be a democratic society, but the facts are we're getting less and less democratic all the time, and the wind is blowing more and more in the direction of the big money.
It's become apparent to me that the lie is too big to confess. This is an insidious, progressive, highly debilitating illness which robs people of their lives, their souls, their ability to function. These sins committed are so great and so ugly and so large that it can't be negotiated out. So the lie is too big to confess at this point.
The world is changing, and a smart country will do what the United States did not do. 28 countries right now, people are doing this about tick-borne disease.
It's said many times that we have a high standard of care. What we actually have is a standard of neglect.
Helsevesen som hopper over de vanskeligste pasientene og later som om de ikke
So firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. I know a lot of you are very, very sick.
We need to be counted. Our lives matter. And I'm asking you not to give up. I'm asking you to keep going.
I never dreamed that following your heart and your instincts in medicine and working very hard would be met by such resistance by those in power. And I've learned. I used to be a very naive, hardworking doctor. Now I'm a very cynical, hardworking doctor.
Knowing everything that I've been through, I still wouldn't change it because of how much I've learned, all the people I've met. I know I wouldn't want to go into the medical field if this had never happened.
Try not to get discouraged. If you feel that something is wrong with your body, you know your body better than anyone. You're the only one that lives in it. So don't let someone tell you that you're wrong.
You can get better, and you will get better. I think with self-care and diligence, slow and steady, you'll get well.
I believe that each of us is here for a purpose, and I believe that if we have the good fortune to recover from a health problem, maybe a very serious problem, there's a reason for us to continue to be here and to do what we're doing.
I can't think of anything more important to do with your life's work than to say, all right, we have 150 million people with chronic illness in our country, and we probably got a lot of it wrong. So I feel like I have to continue the fight. I think we're going to win the fight.
I think Robert Frost had a poem, two paths diverged in the middle of a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And that's it.
Dear Jared, it is 5 a.m. and I'm sitting on our front porch. Hopefully, today will be a day of celebration as we prepare to go to the hospital this morning to bring you into this world. Your birth is a victory for many women and families in this world. It is the last chapter in our struggle with this disease. It is a testament to the hope that many families with Lyme disease depend upon. Hope is what created you. Love, Mommy.